Hi, I'm Angela Casey, and welcome to Edinburgh Outdoors, a podcast exploring Edinburgh outdoor spaces and the people in them. Have you ever wondered what it sounds like inside a beehive? On a classic driech day in Edinburgh where we were enjoying the haw, I went to visit the West Linton District Beekeepers Association at their hives in an equally driech Carlops, a short drive from the city in the Pentland Hills. Our uncharacteristically cold summer has been hard on the bees, and they were definitely staying home on the day I arrived. So I didn't see many, and they didn't open up the hives either, but I heard all about the group, their hives, and about the bees too. Thanks to enterprising member Jane, who managed to push the microphone inside the hive, we also got to hear what was going on inside, and it's worth a listen. While I was there, I met apiary manager Maggie Mowbray and members Dave Stokes, Jane Slight, and Pam Tennant, who tutored me in everything bee and talked about their group and, of course, their love of bees.
I think a lot of people believe that beekeeping is, I'll just stick a hive in my garden and leave them to get on with it. And if that's what you want to do, then honeybees is not for you. You need to get the solitary bee, hives, the little, with the holes in and things, and provide a home for solitary bees, because honey beekeeping is quite hard work. It really is. It takes a lot of commitment and time and kit, and it's quite expensive and it's quite time consuming in the summer. There's not much to do in the winter, but really you should be there every sort of 5 or 6 days right through the summer from May to now. That's quite a commitment.
Yeah. So welcome to the Edinburgh Outdoors podcast. I'm standing here looking at your hive. So why is that hive different to that hive?
That is called a nucleus hive. So that is a smaller hive for a smaller colony. Maybe if we have a new queen, and we'll just put her in there with a couple of frames. So it takes about 6 frames, whereas these take usually about 11 frames. This is also wood, and this one is made from very tough polystyrene. It keeps them very warm, and so this colony is quite small. And once it grows big enough, we'll move it into a fuller hive, like one of these.
How many bees would be in that one?
I haven't looked inside there for a while, so I couldn't really. 50,000 up on, but in the summer, in the winter, that will decrease. So it depends on the time of year.
It depends on lots of things: the colony, how good the forage is in this area. Some hives are actually brimming with bees. You take the lid off, and you've got 2 supers on, and the bees are bubbling out of the top of the top box.
The supers are where you keep the honey. So these are shallower boxes which go on top. The brood is in the bottom box here. That's where all the young bees are made. The queen lays eggs, and then above is where they start to store the honey.
So if you've got 5 hives here, and there was it 50,000?
Yeah.
You've got 250,000 bees here. Do you think?
In the height of summer, yeah.
And how far do they fly away from here?
As little as possible.
Right, so they stay quite close to the hive.
If they can forage up to a couple of miles away. Something like oilseed rape, which is a high octane fuel, they will fly a long way for. But in general, the further they travel, the more energy they expend travelling. And the honey that they bring back has less energy than they've used to get it, which is a bit counterproductive.
Yeah. And how did you get them in there? How did you actually get the bees in the hive?
Well, we're all beekeepers, so originally they would have come from our hive, and they would have started off as small colonies, such as in the nucleus, and built up over time. And then they've expanded in the apiary. So every year, bees, it's their intention to reproduce and expand, which is why you get swarms in the summer. But it's our job to try and stop them from swarming, but also we can then create new colonies by splitting them when they've got a new queen and putting them in starting a new colony. So that's probably most of these bees originated from maybe Dave and then in the last few years they've expanded themselves naturally.
So you've each got hives at home?
I've got 2 hives in my garden and another 4 on the Pennycook estate.
And do they swarm?
Yes, they would. We try to stop them from swarming because we don't want to lose them. When a colony swarms, about half the bees will leave with the old queen. So you'll lose a lot of bees. And also they can take up residence in somebody's chimney or house, so we really don't want that to be happening as a result of our beekeeping. So we do various swarm prevention techniques in the summer to try and stop that from happening. On the whole, I think we've managed successfully so far. We think. It's hard to tell. Some bees are definitely swarmier than others. Some kinds of bees are swarmier than others. And we actively keep more kind of localised native type bees here, which are not always the swarmiest. They do swarm, but they're not as much as the carniolans, for instance.
And when you put your kit on, which we're not doing today because of the weather, when you put your kit on and you open the hive, do they all come out in a big
No,
they're just
calm.
on the frame?
Yeah, they're very calm. We don't. That's another thing, that because it's a teaching apiary and in a local community, we try and ensure that we only keep genetics which are of a good temperament. Really, with people walking past getting stung, or so. As you can see, it's a very, very foggy day today. The bees are not really out very much, but we're all standing here in the apiary with no bee suits on. We wouldn't open the hive without a bee suit on, because health and safety reasons, but no, they don't all fly up at all. They usually are fairly calm. You'll maybe get 1 or 2 bees coming to investigate, see why you're opening them up, but that's normal.
The reasons for wearing a bee suit are to stop the bees going up your sleeve, where they'll feel entrapped, and then they'll sting you, getting trapped in your hair, or going up your trouser leg. Having said that, the gloves that we wear, if I'm working my own gloves, I often won't wear any gloves at all, in spite of being allergic to bee venom.
So you mentioned that you do teaching about bees. Can we visit?
So we have weekly meetings throughout the season, and we have all levels of beekeepers come along to it. We always have one very experienced beekeeper on running the session that day, and then a mixture of complete beginners to intermediate beekeepers, to those, maybe somebody who's had hives a couple of years. And we go through all the hives and we check them, and we deal with whatever situation we find, which is there's always something that we find in one of the hives. It could be they're thinking of swarming, or they could be thinking of changing the queen, or they might need feeding. This year that's been quite an issue. So we just talk through what we're doing and why we're doing it, and people learn that way. So we don't run courses as such. We have people who join our membership, and then they come and they help out on our weekly inspections.
This apiary belongs to West Linton District Beekeepers Association. We are all members, and the people we will educate are members as well.
So if someone was thinking that they wanted to start, they could come to you and find out what's involved.
But we also run open days, which is not for beekeepers, but if somebody just wants to see inside the hive, they may have an idea to become a beekeeper, but they equally might know, I'm not being a beekeeper, but I'm kind of curious. So we run 2 of those a year. We were set up here. We had a grant from the Scottish Borders Council, support from lots of people, Sustainable West Linton, that's another charity, Scottish Beekeepers, etc., etc. And with gracious consent of the landowner as well, who's allowed us to set up here.
When are the open days? When do you do those?
Saturdays in July and June. Yeah. It's by arrangement, because we can't have folk just drifting in here. Because of the suits, we've got part of our equipment is a selection of different size suits, so it would be handy because because you could actually handle the bees on an open day if you wanted, if that's what some people want to do, which they do. But some people don't. They take 3 steps back, and that's also fine.
And how many do you think collectively of your members, how many hives do you think there are between you?
Oh, I know how many members. We've got 30 odd, so what will we say 2 except on an average, and some people
Oh,
Yeah, but some folk don't have
everybody's
any.
got at least 2
Yeah.
if they're active. I think they start off with 1. We supply their first bees. We've got members that donate colonies to the general cause. And
So how do you gain a new colony? How does that happen?
in the spring, that colony there will start producing queen cells. Well, it's late spring, May, June. That's their intention to swarm, which means they want to reproduce as a colony. So then is the time you can do your swarm prevention. As a result of that, you get a small colony which will probably end up in a nuke, like the one behind you. And that, once the queen's been mated, if it's an unmated queen there, or once the queen settles down in there, then we will pass it on to the beekeeper. So it's all part of the natural process. The bees want to take over the world. They want to reproduce, increase their numbers, increase their population, the same as any other creature on this earth. And we capitalise on that. It doesn't look like much like it at the moment, does it? But
Well, there are some coming out over there. We saw some there, didn't we? And we heard them. And we've got a nice bird as well, which is good.
Our bees are actually very dark in colour. They're not stripy at all. They're very, very dark. They do have stripes, but I don't know if you can see them going in. There's a couple coming in here with pollen.
So Maggie, how long have you been involved and what is your role here?
So I'm the apiary manager. I took that on last year, so this is my second year as apiary manager. So I devise the timetables for inspections, sort of organised a work party to overhaul the apiary a bit, and I kind of try and keep track of where things are and what we need every week. And that's about my job here. But I got involved with this association probably through Dave, because Dave was my mentor originally, so encouraged me to join.
What about you, Dave? When did you first get involved?
I started beekeeping 40 years ago.
Right.
And after about 5 years I joined West Linton, and 5 years later I was secretary. One of the things I'm finding is that now, with the resources on the internet and the people asking me questions about beekeeping, I'm learning more and more about it every year. You never stop learning.
And Jane, what about you?
Oh, a bit like Dave, it's in the history books, 30 years odd or something. I went to my first beekeeping meeting in West Linton when I lived there. Yeah, just knew I wanted to keep bees. I had young children, so I needed something to take me away from them. And I've been beekeeping ever since, on and off.
And
So,
Pam.
hi, hello. So I've been involved for about 3 years, I think, and that was around about the time that I started keeping bees myself. And I had a mentor locally where I live in Edinburgh, and he was part of the association, so I came along because this is where he came. And they have been incredibly helpful and supportive as a new beekeeper, both the in-person meetings at the hives, but also we have a very active WhatsApp group for our members, which is a way of sharing problems and trying to solve problems collectively, which I find incredibly helpful.
Do you think there's a kind of person who is a beekeeper?
No, absolutely not. I think we're very different. I mean, apart from perhaps liking outdoors and appreciating wildlife generally, I think, and, having a love of insects helps a little bit. We're not being super scared of them, but then I think when I started, I was quite intimidated by bees, and that was part of the learning journey for me, to kind of overcome that innate fear of a stinging insect, actually. So it was a personal challenge as much as anything. But now I look around our members, I think we're hugely different in age, social background.
So if somebody is interested in coming along, but they're not necessarily thinking they want to keep bees, but they want to know more, can they come to your open days?
To our open days, that would be a good thing. Get in touch via the website. That would be the first thing to do.
So it's been a really crappy summer. Has this affected the bees in any way?
Yeah, it has. They've not built up as strongly as they probably normally would have. Early in the season, we had to feed them because there just wasn't enough natural nectar for them, and they couldn't get out even if there was to kind of forage. So it has been tough for them. There's been not too many nice days. Surprisingly, one of them in particular has produced some honey late, probably July, August. but that's just a small amount that will get sold to the local community here. But in general, yeah, and queen mating has been a wee bit of an issue as well. Queens need reasonably nice weather to get out and mate. So they're all still okay, but they're not doing as well as we would have probably expected them to. And it's not just here. I know other associations have had the same issue, and we've all had the same issues with our own hives. So it's all over the UK actually, I think, this year.
Do they just sort of hibernate in the winter?
Not hibernation as such, so that they form a winter cluster. The winter bees are longer lived, they have more fat bodies so they can survive longer periods, and they cluster to keep warm. They have a kind of ball of bees which are warm, and they use their flight muscles to keep warm. The ones on the outside are a lot colder, but they kind of swap places over time and protect the queen. She doesn't lay so much, so there's not as much brood really to keep warm. They're just really surviving until it's time to.
So when you get cold weather in the summer, like we've had maybe on a run of cold days, do they start to cluster a bit?
It's probably not been that cold that they have to do that as such, but they won't venture out really if it's really cold. They'll probably eat any stores that they do have inside the hive, and if it's consistently like that, they will then run out of food, and that's when you maybe need to start thinking about feeding them. So we would feed them sugar syrup, which is similar compositionally to nectar, so that would keep them alive until they can get out and work again.
So if somebody had a swarm in their garden, they would call you, would they?
They might call us if they're around here. There's also Edinburgh Beekeepers, they might call them, but yeah, they could call us. I have been contacted a couple of times this summer, and I've put it on our group WhatsApp, and some of our members have gone to have a look. Most of us, if we go to collect a swarm, we'll collect it as long as it's not in a dangerous location, or that we're not going to have to do any building work. Sometimes they're at the top of a tree, but a lot of the time they're maybe just on a bush or, in someone's front garden. There's been a couple on bikes this year in Edinburgh.
For me, it's a great relaxation, my apiary, because I can go there. I'm not going to be bothered by my wife or anybody else, and I can just.
There seems to be a pattern.
And I can just get on with things and at my own time. I usually spend far more than I need to there, and the other one is here because I'm teaching people, and that really does it for me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I think you said you go and do school talks as well.
I would say we do it regularly rather than often. But
yes.
Yeah, we are talking to various people and completely different groups, Yeah, we've been into schools at various stages, primary schools, but the secondary schools now, a lot are thinking about getting their own beehives and beekeeping clubs and courses, because the SQA are running courses in this, so you can come away with a qualification from a secondary school in this. So that's different, but yeah. So no, I love talking. I can talk bees for a long time.
Anyone else want to volunteer their favourite outside spaces? I don't need to ask all of you, but anyone, just because part of the reason of the podcast is to help people find their outside space.
Well, I mean, I think I absolutely agree with Dave. It's, I love spending time just outdoors with my bees, but also in this area, you've got the Pentland Hills there on the doorstep. Where Dave keeps his bees is the Pennycook Estate, which is another lovely area to go walking. There's loads of paths, and it doesn't matter what the weather, it looks fantastic. There's always something to see, and it's a lovely area. So there's a lot of really lovely outdoor spaces here to explore.
It's nice down here. I really like it.
It's just nice in the spring when the bees are out all the summer and trying to see where they are or where they're going, or even if you're nowhere near your house, like Dave said, they'll fly miles looking at flowers and seeing what they are foraging on.
You go into a shop and someone's selling local heather honey. How can they know that it's heather honey? Because surely the bees you can't make the bees only heather honey.
A lot of beekeepers take their bees to the heather. So they'll take their hives and they'll plonk them right in the middle of the heather, and the bees will go to their nearest source, and they do like heather, so they will forage mainly on heather. It's not to say that they won't be foraging on other things, but I think the legal amount is 75% of the honey has to be from that source in order to call it that. We're always happy to have new members, and if there are people who are keen to maybe think about starting beekeeping or find out if it's something that they want to do, then they'd be very welcome to come along and join our association. It's really not very expensive, and we're quite an active association, and they'd be very welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed coming to see you. I was quite nervous about how I was going to record while wearing a bee suit, so actually maybe it's easier than we thought. But it's really fascinating, and I've learnt lots of things. I really enjoyed meeting the West Linton District Beekeepers. What a fantastic group they are, and so knowledgeable. They do go around talking to schools and groups, so it's worth keeping an eye out in case they're coming your way, or simply find out more about bees because it's fascinating. And the way bees work together for a common aim could teach us all a lot. I don't think I'll take up beekeeping, but I can understand much more about why somebody now might want to, and I can see the value in going along to one of their open days, which you can find out about on their website, and just learning more about bees and seeing what's involved in beekeeping, because I think it's really fascinating. If you've enjoyed the Edinburgh Outdoors podcast, please rate us on your podcast app and leave a review. And don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues about it too. If you know of an outdoors space in or around Edinburgh that might like to be featured, you can get in touch by email, Instagram or TikTok.